I'm Jim Check,
I'm Renee Merrifield.
and we're here with Beyond the Ballot, and we got a really quick show for you. We're going to go right till 1 o'clock. It's 12:09, but so many things to talk about. But the big thing, Venezuela changes everything, and it does, doesn't it? It really puts the hurry into, the hurry should have been there already, but
Yeah, and Jim, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum, and the reality is, Carney is so behind the eight ball on what should have been done and what should have been negotiated, and this is absolutely his oh no moment. It is scary to think that now our greatest and one and only poker chip that was on the table, which was oil, is now off of the table because the U.S. no longer requires it. It is a very scary moment for Canada. And regardless of what happens in the short term with the oil and gas prices, we're talking about what's going to happen in the long term. And the long term is CUSMA. The long term is our trade partnership with the U.S. And without a pipeline anywhere but the U.S., we are in dire straits.
yeah, the big thing is that crude that they have is very similar to our Fort Mac crude, heavy crude, and the U.S. refineries are set up for that. And again, we're going to talk about it, like where capital flows is where the investment goes. You know what I mean? Like into the certainty and all that stuff in Canada right now.
I don't know if you noticed, and Exxon has since removed it from their website. But at first, Exxon said, we are ready to deploy capital to reignite the oil infrastructure in Venezuela. And I thought that was a very interesting message to send out, but it definitely echoed what we've been saying, which is, the investment dollars are cowards. Investment dollars go where the path is the easiest, where the outcome is the most certain, and where they can make the fastest money possible for their shareholders. This is not rocket science. This is not new. This is something that has happened over the course of time. And this is a scary moment for capital that was supposed to come to Canada, because they're going to look at those two entities and go, you know what, Venezuela's a safer bet right now, which is sad to hear.
I do want to get your input on the length of time it took Mark Carney to come out with a statement on the happenings in Venezuela. Pierre Poilievre came out almost immediately, as did many other places. And I just want to know what that delay meant. He seemed to be waiting for Macron and those guys to make a statement before Mark Carney said anything.
Yeah, I think this tells us that we do not have a strong prime minister. He should have been all over this. For him to yield that position to Pierre, and you and I talked about this last week. I think Pierre is going to take a different tone. I think he's going to have a strength to him this year that we haven't seen in the months after the election. And this was case in point. I mean, his message was loud, clear, and immediate. And instead, what you had was a lot of social media chatter about why the prime minister was not saying it. What was he actually believing? Why Anita Anand was the only one to come out with a weird and very obtuse, vague statement on social media that said nothing. And so is he following in the EU and trying to figure out what they're doing? Maybe. Was he just on vacation and didn't, have his cell phone on? I hope not. But really, this just belies the fact that he is very weak on the geopolitical scale and in the international realm.
And I think that last excuse there would not be very valid, because he would always have an aide with him that would be their responsibility to have their ear to the ground for things like this. So, like a 6-hour gap there would not be, there's no such thing as that. The other thing is the media in Canada seem to, especially the state-funded broadcasters, seem to, they went actually to get a quote from Russia and Iran and saying that it was a threat to democracy for the United States to go in there and remove a dictator. I couldn't believe it, they used Russia and Iran to kind of back up their condemnation.
This is ridiculous. Obviously, there's going to be Russia and Iran are going to be very upset because Russia as an oil and gas producer is not super happy, because this could open up a whole bunch of trade negotiations with, I mean, that's like going to China because China was, just in Venezuela trying to, shore up
Oh, they did
some.
go there too. They did go to China.
So it's definitely an odd one for them to seek commentary from. But what I found most interesting is the condemnation of Trump's move. I just want to remind all of the listeners out there that Obama did the same, and with after 9/11, that or sorry, Bush did the same after 9/11. Obama did the same with the Obama,
Laden.
with
Yeah.
Bin Laden, and then Biden did the same with Afghanistan and ISIS.
Well, they
So
had bounties. Yeah, they had
this is not
bounties.
unusual. This is something the US does all the time. And in all of the cases that I just mentioned, all of it is about oil. All of it is about energy independence. And Jim, you and I have been saying it over and over and over again. Energy is everything, and cheap energy is your country's prosperity. Trump knows that. Biden knew that. Obama knew that. And even if Biden didn't know that, his advisors knew that, or the people that were actually running the country at the time. And Bush certainly knew that. This is not a new game for the U.S. They are going to, secure up all of those energy sources, and Trump is just following suit.
And it was funny to watch the media, the left media in Canada and in the US, and most of the media in Canada left, and then in the US, and then all the protesters that broke out there. And then you've seen kind of the world leaders kind of take a position that, yes, this should have happened, but then the left media saying, yes, but it should have happened a different way. I'm just like, for 27 years, which different way are you talking about? Which different way? Right.
I'm not sure about that one. And, I loved one of the social media commentators that I was watching was actually like, hey, I just want to remind the left that, Venezuela, abortion is legal, being, gay is legal, is illegal. There's like, I mean, they had this whole litany of things, and, the most conservative country in the world. And it's like, you're bemoaning the facts that there was an overturning of the government. Like, I did not understand at all. I mean, it's as silly as the left being really pro Palestine. Seeing the LGBTQIA plus for Palestine is like, I mean, they would die and be killed if they ever went to Palestine. All of those different aspects of social or sexual orientation and identification are simply not tolerated in those countries. So for me, this is like, what are you fighting for, and is it just the next soundbite? I'm not sure.
And it was really weird because the Venezuelans were coming out, especially in America, celebrating this, and they were actually clashing with the people screaming to release Maduro. So you're actually wanting them to release Maduro to go back and oppress his people. 8 million people left that country because of oppression and a whole bunch of things. You want him released to continue to go oppress people. That's it. There is no logic. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and there was this great social media clip that actually showed the pro Maduro protesters, and it was like a crowd of about 30. And then it was like, and today in Venezuela, and it was like this huge, like, mass of people that were celebrating in the streets. So it was, it was a very strange juxtaposition. And I think that what you would find is the vast majority of Venezuelans are very excited about what the possibilities are now for a government.
I guess the bigger thing is, what does this mean to Canada? And we've seen some of the reflection already, or reaction, because the stock markets have been up dramatically on both sides of the border, other than the Canadian Energy Index, which has been down. People saying that Venezuelan oil could replace the need for Canadian crude into the U.S. So if we can't sell our crude into the U.S. because Venezuelan oil is used in replacement, where do we go with our vast amounts of resources?
We go offshore. That is the only place that we go. When our biggest trading partner, i.e. the US, no longer requires one of our largest exports, we have to go offshore. And that is where, again, Danielle Smith has been singularly focused on making sure that they have another route for their oil and gas. And, if it doesn't go through BC, it'll go through either Alaska or it will go through Washington. And the reason is because the US will welcome it, because they'll get their royalties and their levies, and it can still go out of the ports. So, the US will see it as like, well, we don't need this, but at least we get to profit because of it.
Yeah, and because, it really questions like the 10 years of suppression and how we put ourselves in this place. And still, right now, like the liberals have been saying that we're in the worst economic crisis ever since World War II. And yet he jets off to France again he could have done a Zoom call instead of like getting out there and saying, Evie, we're building a pipeline to the north coast, or sorry, to the west coast. It doesn't really matter what you say because this is imperative now that it happens. But we're not doing that. We're still, like he had an interview in France there, and he was still pushing carbon capture and saying that the world wants clean carbon, like with pathways in that. But we already know that the Southeast Asia they want cheap, reliable energy. They're not worried whether it is carbon capture or not.
That the picture of all of the sizes of the economies displayed as these like round dots or circles, I think is a very poignant one. If you look at the top 5 economies in the world, not one of them has any form of carbon capture or carbon emissions requirement. There is those are the 5 largest in the world. So for Carney to go after maybe the minuscule, small, let's even call it the bottom 20% of the circles, you can't even add up those 20 and total one US. You can't total up the, everyone under the top 5 and total those top, 5 economies. So to go after such a minuscule niche market is so ridiculous from an economic perspective, and so futile from trying to get Canada's economy moving forward again. I think we are in some very, very difficult times until we have a prime minister who is simply going to make sure that our oil and gas gets off of our borders.
Yeah, and most of that audience you're talking about, or that market you're talking about, is in Europe. And that's an Eastern pipeline, and that's not even being discussed. Like, I mean, it looks like that is a never no-go. Not a no-go, but a never no-go. And then the West Coast is the only thing that, so Japan signed a deal with the Americans. They didn't ask for any carbon capture. And China we know what China will buy energy.
Germany is taking, oil and gas from the US. Like, this is almost borderline ridiculous. In terms of trying to tell the Canadian public that this is what the world wants, when none of the world is actually doing that, except a very small niche minority. So we have to get relevant. We have to get relevant quickly. And I don't see that happening under this prime minister. This prime minister is starting to show more and more of his true ethic and boundary and value moving forward. And I think that we need to believe what he is doing and not what he has said in the past.
So we did a really good explainer video. We broke down Mark Carney's speech at the UN in a committee on climate change, and we broke it down and showed everything that was going on. And then in there, it also shows that the biggest investor in carbon capture, CCUS, is none other than Brookfield. So unless he sells all his holdings in Brookfield, I mean, it's really tough to see how he pushes Canada towards CCUS when the rest of the world isn't going there, if he has, like a very obvious perceived conflict of interest.
And yet Brookfield knows where the largest economy in the world is, and that is why they are in New York and not in Toronto. So, again, more disingenuity from, Prime Minister Carney, and we as Canadians are going to have a decision this year, I believe. And I don't think it's, I think that's why the media is trying to whoop up the fear tactics and the scare tactics and the fear among the population, because I think that they're gunning and preparing for an election in the spring.
There's a really good article in the Bureau there, and it talks, and I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs from it. As 2026 starts with a high consequence geopolitical events in Venezuela, Iran, and Canada continues to present itself to the world as a stable, prosperous, and benign. Yet the defining lesson of the past year is that our perceived strength is increasingly an illusion. a facade of sustained political denial, regulatory weakness, and monetization of risk across multiple fronts: land ownership, real estate, immigration, organized crime, national security, the same pattern over and over. And that is, like all those Trudeau era bills are still there laying on top of energy. They're still there. And then, like even Carney's words, if you're Exxon or whatever, and you're looking Venezuela versus Canada, the American militaries are going to make sure that the Venezuelan investments get looked after. In Canada, you're not worried about the military thing, but you're worried about the government regulating you out after you've spent billions of dollars and then telling you no go.
Yeah, and Jim, you said it earlier today, very poignantly, which is we've done this to ourselves. We are the product, and where we are economically is the result, the direct result of legislation that has been passed by our federal government predominantly and by our provincial governments secondarily. This is a self-made inflicted wound, and we need to change the tide. That's the only thing that we can do. And without demanding, like Danielle Smith did, without demanding that you're going to remove these different, bills and lessen them, we're not going to see a different result. It's the definition of insanity. So we have to really press hard right now and look at the leverage we are losing. We are becoming irrelevant on the world stage. And we have to do something differently and do something differently quickly. You and I on election night said, two things. One, Carney's got to get a vision forward for, who Canada can be and what Canada is. And then number two, we have to get a deal with Trump. We have not gotten a deal with Trump. In fact, we have eroded all opportunities. Venezuela is the nail in the coffin. This is a horrible situation for Canada in that the U.S. no longer requires our oil and gas, and also the oil that the U.S. will have access to is the largest in the world. It's not like there's a tiny source there. It's the largest in the world, and if that starts producing, it could nullify what our oil is actually worth. And if we continue to put industrial carbon tax and emission caps on that oil and gas sector, that oil and gas is dead in the water. There is no way that anyone is going to purchase it from us. So we are in a very bad situation right now, and that is because Carney did not do the job that he was supposed to do. Now, the other aspect of that is not just the deal with Trump, which is going to affect CUSMA and it will affect our negotiating power at the table, but is the vision forward. His vision forward right now is this carbon neutral, oil and gas sector. That is not going to happen. And there is no market for that. So I don't know who he's selling to. I don't know who he's projecting to, but that vision that he is starting to tell us about and starting to show us is catastrophic for Canada's future.
It looks like the loyalties are towards Brookfield's massive investment, the biggest investment, billions and billions of dollars invested in carbon capture. And it seems to be that's what he's pushing instead of like Canada's prosperity. And I say this for a couple of reasons. Right now, where is he? He's in France, and it seems like every time there's a point of contention between the European Union or UK and the United States, Mark Carney chooses to stand with the European Union or the UK. And we're seeing that right now with Greenland and all those things, and it boggles the mind. This is our neighbor. This is where we should be standing because they are the largest economy in the world. That we rest under their military, all kinds of things. Yet it seems like like the Americans are about drill baby drill and cheap, reliable energy, and Venezuela is going to give them tons of cheap, reliable energy, and Canada seems to be hell bent on expensive energy with carbon credits, and where American companies are coming here to kind of like skin the cat and then tax our private companies. It seems like there's a conflict of interest there, and Canada's not at the receiving end of it.
There is a perceived conflict of interest indeed, absolutely. I hate thinking over and over and over again how my prime minister might be, favoring one company that he holds particular shares in. But the other aspect of this that this is also that global elitism that is in full swing. And this is Carney showing how much he believes in that global elitism over the prosperity of the general public of Canada. That is that is an opening politically that can be easily taken in by Pierre Poilievre in this next season. And you're going to hear him talk more about paychecks, more about the blue collar worker, more about the jobs that need to be created in our economy in Canada. And you're going to see him take the space that Carney is leaving behind by going and talking to his elite cronies.
And the other thing, when politicians speak with ambiguity, it's intentional. And I mean, I'd be hard pressed to show me a few conversations where Mark Carney has spoken very clearly. I've heard Trump speaks clearly all the time. I mean, he speaks so clearly that it irritates people. But Trump speaks at a grade 6 level, and that's how he speaks to the people. But Carney speaks at some level that baffles everybody, at some high intellectual level. And you don't know what he said. Like that UN speech, we actually broke it down. You got to go watch it. But most people watched that and they didn't know what he said. But you got to take it sentence by sentence and break it down and then tie it together with a bunch of strings and all that. And he speaks like that on purpose. And we see this coming out even with Chrystia Freeland, what happened here. And I'm sure that this is shocking to me and Ian when we talk about that there isn't a resignation from her herself or a demand for a resignation.
And there should have been. Lisa Raitt was on CTV, I believe it was, last night, and she said it very eloquently. There are conflict of interest rules. There are cooling off periods for MPs, for ministers that need to be adhered to. Simply put, Chrystia Freeland is clearly in default in all of those positions. She should have had a cooling off period. She should not have accepted roles while she was the current MP. She shouldn't even been negotiating those roles. There was already conflict of interest perceived when she took on a second role for Carney while remaining as an MP. The fact that she has not resigned is absolutely absurd. And I think that this is a huge snub of the Canadian people to say that you can hold a position for another country and in another country's best interests while still being paid by the Canadian taxpayer is offensive, if nothing else.
Yeah, and in her, I don't know, I guess her resignation of the special envoy position, but not as MP. She says it's for forwarding democracy or for the democracy of Ukraine. What about the democracy of Canada, where you've been getting paid for the past, 10 years and held the second highest position in Canada, deputy prime minister, finance minister, and she's actually sitting in meetings just right now with representing Ukraine while she still has the ability to vote for Canada on issues. And this is where CBC's running cover for her, saying, well, Carney didn't want to do anything because there could be some really critical votes. So the Liberal Party comes before Canadian democracy? Because that's what I get out of that. I don't know, you get something different?
Canadian democracy requires their MPs to be solely sworn to protect the interests of Canada. There is an oath that is taken when an MP, when an MLA is actually sworn in. Those are very sacred oaths. And right now she is in conflict. You cannot support another country's best interest while supporting Canada's best interest. Those are mutually exclusive. I think that this is a huge blunder. I think this is also a huge blunder for Carney. Yes, of course, there's critical votes, i.e. the confidence vote of the budget that's going to happen in the spring session. But it is ridiculous to maintain those two positions at the same time. They're simply not possible to do in exclusivity.
Well, the easy answer is if it's so critical for the Liberals, then he should have said to her, you don't accept that role until we have a replacement or a by-election. That would have been really simple. You can't represent Ukraine right now. But neither was done, and it shows weak leadership, and it shows even just an affront to democracy, or just like they feel untouchable. And the media seems to let them get away, like CBC running cover and saying, well, there's critical votes that still have to happen.
Yeah. The media is useless when it comes to holding this government accountable. Absolutely useless. Whether they were, running cover for Trudeau or whether they're running cover for Carney right now, it's absolutely brutal how biased the media has been. It was I was really disappointed on the media's takes on Venezuela. I was really disappointed on really drawing attention to Canadians as to what this could mean for them. And Chrystia Freeland is like a cherry on the top. I think they probably tried to get to get this announcement done, while no one was paying attention at the beginning of January when when the Venezuela is in upheaval. But honestly, this is a huge blunder. And you're right, Jim. Weak leadership on the part of the Prime Minister to not demand a higher standard for our democratic process.
And we're media as well, and we've reached out. And I'll give you some examples. We reached out to Mark Miller when he first took on the position when Guilbeault resigned, and that was, I think, December 3rd, if my memory is correct. Several times, because no answer. And then Ian finally sent a kind of a snotty one and says, it's, democracy, you need to answer. And then the answer was not interested. So that's from Mark Miller, not interested. So that's, no accountability. And the same thing goes even locally. You're Steve McNall, Steve McNall, 30 years, is one of the more prominent business reporters here for 30 years serving this community. 7 emails with Stephen Fuhr, unanswered, nothing, just crickets. So they refuse to be held accountable. They pick and choose the media, just like they did with the Online News Act, which is part of the U.S.'s problems with Canada, that and the supply management you and I have talked about, is that they just don't give themselves access, and the only access they do give is to the media that they've crippled and corrupted with funding.
Yeah. And this is an issue that Canadians have to really stand up on and stand up for. We're seeing the ratings of these media outlets plummet. And the reason is they're no longer relevant to Canadians. They're no longer giving them the news. When X is the number one news source, when Now Media is on the surge, and when you and I can hold a show and get 20,000 to 30,000 viewers, there's a huge issue on those fronts. And this is really why we need to take a better look at some of the laws that these liberals, and I'll say these liberals because while there was hope that Carney was going to usher in a new day, this is the same old, and they're practicing the same hide and go seek with the media that is trying to hold them accountable.
Yeah, and a big thanks to you too, because this show's done extremely well, and we're banging on the door of 1 million views a month now. So that is the success of that, and that is people wanting real information and not just being fed a narrative that comes across. And we only get better by competing and by being held accountable, because that's how we get better. And they refuse to be held accountable, and that is a problem for democracy, right? That is one of the things they stand up all the time and they say Trump is a threat to democracy. Trump takes questions all day long, 3 hours, and he sends his people out when they do something, this Venezuelan thing. He sends all his people out to all the networks that they don't even like, and they spend an hour on those networks talking to the American people. And that's what this is. We're talking to the Canadian public right here, right now.
And the thing about Trump is that he is blunt. He is doing everything very out in the open. He said yesterday, yeah, this is about oil. That's what I'm going to have. I'm going to have oil out of this. He's not being obtuse. He's not being vague. There is no word salad with him. He doesn't perform that way. So is it annoying? For sure. Is it blunt? Yes. Do we agree with everything he does? No, but man, we could use some of that right now in Canada. We could use some just, straight talking. And I would say the best straight talker we have is Danielle Smith. You don't wonder what she is doing or why she is doing it or what, and she is not afraid of going to all the small towns and all of the small outlets and holding those media
town halls, right? You know what I mean?
So, and my hope, Jim, is that with this show that we make politics relevant. We help you understand what exactly politicians are doing and how that's going to make your life change. For the good or for the worse. And right now, the Liberals need to make some changes to really positively impact Canadians' lives.
Well, you just got a nomination to be the leader of the BC Conservatives, so there you go.
I love that. Thank you. I am flattered.
It is the Freeland thing is tough to swallow, though. It is really tough to swallow. It's almost like they feel that they're untouchable, because I don't know how anybody could do that and not
It's
feel really bad about what's going on.
it's wrong. It's simply wrong. You cannot do two jobs at the same time that both require your ultimate allegiance. You cannot. That is like having a wife and a girlfriend at the same time. You cannot. It's like having a husband and a boyfriend at the same time. You cannot. It's simply not possible to be loyal to both. So this needs to stop. Chrystia Freeland needs to resign. We, as the Canadian public, need to demand for that to happen.
And then no cold day in hell. That's from a local MP here out of Vernon there. That's MP Scott Anderson blows the whistle in the Liberal plot to buy a majority. And that is, when Mark Carney was interviewed by, I think it was Rosemary Barton of CBC, he said, oh, no, I'm not trying to lure people. They're attracted to us. They're coming to us. And this kind of dumps a bucket of cold water on that whole attraction thing. And it's like, do we not, as Canadians, deserve somebody that talks straight and tells us the truth? Like, are we too, or do we not deserve the truth? I guess that's the real question. Do we not deserve just like 27,000 votes don't matter because Michael Maw decided himself that he's going to nullify 27,000 voices so that he could walk over to the Liberal Party? And Scott Anderson said no.
Yeah. And thank you to Scott. That is commendable. It's laudable. Yes, Carney is on a full-blown campaign to try and get that 172 number. He's now down to 171 because Chrystia Freeland's going to resign because the Canadian public are going to require her to do so. I just believe. But honestly, this is and I know that crossing the floor is something that our parliamentary system allows and doesn't require any sort of revote, etc. But this is a difficult one to take. It is not something that I particularly like. I think especially so close to an election, i.e. we're not even a year out from the election, we're like 7 months. This does feel like a nullification of those votes, and it feels like a very subversive, underhanded way to try and achieve a majority. I think if Mark Carney wants his majority, he should go back to the polls and see how they do. Will the Canadian public like it? No, probably not. But the reality is, if he wants his majority so badly, that's what he should be doing instead of working so hard and spending so much time on the politics.
Yeah, and they've ramped up the scare machine again. Here's the Globe and Mail put out this article. We need to prepare for the possibility the U.S. uses military coercion against Canada. And then Charlie Angus, I'm sure you're familiar with Charlie Angus, talking about how the Americans are going to invade us just like they did Venezuela. So they used fear to drive the boomers to vote for Carney in the past, and maybe they are getting ready for election as they ramp up the fear. This is irresponsible journalism, I believe, by the Globe and Mail. I know it's an opinion piece, but I mean, running something like this and then Charlie Angus coming out, it seems they only go to Charlie Angus when they need to ramp up some type of fear. The guy is kind of like, I don't know if he's all there.
Yeah. For me, this is what I said earlier. This is their tactic. They are going to try and ramp up the fear. They are going to try and really use that as a tactic against Canadians. I think that Canadians are wiser than that. I think that they are understanding. I think that this is a government that has not succeeded on doing what they said they were going to do on any front. And I think this is a really I think this is a bad tactic, and eventually, I mean, there's the whole tale of the boy who cried wolf, and I think that this is just another example. People have fear fatigue, and it's like, well, at some point, we just need someone to stand up to the bully, not make us afraid. And Carney has shown he cannot stand up to Trump, not even in any way, shape, or form. He can't do it in person. He can't do it in in word. He can't do it. Like I don't understand what he's been able to accomplish in this particular front. So for me, it's if I want anyone, I want someone who understands how to ramp up military, and that would not be Carney. That would be someone else. Time for change of government.
Is this the last hurrah for the globalists, though? Because we see Macron is his popularity is in the sewer. Same with Keir Starmer, and Mark Carney is like obviously he's new and his popularity is quite a bit higher than those two. But it's like the and then Albanese. It's the four of them are kind of the last of the bastion of the globalists, right? And it seems odd that Chrystia Freeland she was on the WEF website as a director, scrubbed that when she ran for the Liberal leadership, scrubbed that right off. And Mark Carney was a foundation member on there, scrubbed that when he ran as well. It seems odd that they scrub it off there when they're ready to run. And then he's still listed as an author on that website too. So that globalist movement, it seems like the people have decided that they're done with the globalist movement. It's just that we still have, four leaders held over that are still pushing that same agenda. And Chrystia Freeland, the last piece on that, it's odd that, like of all the people that they could select to help rebuild Ukraine, Chrystia Freeland, after what she did in Canada, would be the choice for the Ukrainians to rebuild Ukraine. Doesn't make it.
Especially when there's like 40% fraud in terms of the money that's going in there. I do not understand why Chrystia Freeland would be the choice there, other than it was a deal that was done with Zelensky and Carney. We'll give you $2.5 billion. We'll backstop the rest of the European money, but in order to do so, you have to have one of ours embedded inside of your organization. If that's true, then she's just a lame duck. She actually will not be doing anything for the Ukraine. But if she isn't just a lame duck, then she is the wrong choice, because what she did to Canada is abhorrent.
And it seems odd too, like, they're all over there doing their stuff. Trump's not over there. And then, they're all, acting kind of like big and posturing. But as soon as Trump shows up in the room, then it's a completely different scenario. And I think, I hope there's peace in Ukraine, because I do lots of interviews with Dennis Dorchuk here at Friends Ukraine. We've had people on straight from Kiev. We've had them on the air with us. And there's too many young men and women that are dying for 4 years now on both sides of that. And
agreed. I want the war to end, but my prediction is that it's not going to end because there's too much money involved. There's too many benefactors from that money that's going in. There's too many bad actors, and they're going to try and keep the war going because it's too beneficial for them.
Let's finish this up with BC. All this stuff going on in Venezuela, and David Eby had a clip there, and I won't play it again, but he was just like, he's saying people have no choice, but they can either buy oil from us. I played it earlier on the Really Big Show, or they can buy it from Venezuela. He was mocking, but that didn't age well. But I mean, this really puts pressure on him to open up the BC coastline.
It does, but I think he's not going to do it. I don't think he is. I think that he is too entrenched in his activism at this point. And I think that, the NDP have a very large Green contingency in and amongst their ranks. So I don't see that they're going to be able to change course on that whatsoever. This is a dangerous and very, very down time for the Eby government. And, I think that as the candidates for the BC Conservatives leadership race start to take form, he doesn't just have one voice that's going to be up against him. He's going to probably have 5 voices. It looks like Peter Millibar is definitely organizing. It looks like Chris Gardner is organizing. Ian Black has his team with Dimitri Panopoulos and Brad Zubik. And then we've also got Yuri Fulmer, who has already launched and is in Cranbrook doing his first town hall meet and greet. So, I think that he's going to have a lot of voices, railing against him. And he's also going to have the interim leader, Trevor Halford, who is no stranger to politics, having, really from, university on been in the political realm. So David Eby is going to have a lot of guns pointed towards him and not a lot of pushback. The other thing that, I know that there are grave concerns about what's happening with the Heritage Conservation Act, what's happening with the Cowichan decision, what, the Gigatla appeal means, and the only recourse is to repeal DRIPA, and that's not going to happen with David Eby. So I think he's hoping that it's all going to go away. I think that the international attention that this has received is going to keep it front and center as well. I think that it does take time for different organizations to figure out their positions and start coming out. But I think there is going to be a lot more media attention and a lot more voices that are really signaling that this is a very, very bad time for business in BC.
Do you not find it odd that David Eby is actually sitting in the way of Canadian prosperity on two fronts, and two of the biggest fronts for Canadian prosperity, and that is our oil and gas sector, and then the other one is our real estate. And in the real estate and the DRIPA thing, with the uncertainty that causes in property owners, I've talked to many realtors now here that say, Albertans and that aren't even consider buying. They can't get mortgages on some of the properties here now. He's sitting in the way of where most Canadians have their wealth. It's in real estate, and that's caused a lot of uncertainty, and that market all too well. And then also in the oil and gas sector, which is prosperity for all Canadians, with the royalties that come off of that and everything that comes from that. David Eby is in the way of two of the biggest things that we have that drive our economy.
Yeah, and he's in the way of Canadian prosperity. He's also in the way of BC prosperity, and BC prosperity should be a bigger concern for him. They are running a massive deficit. This is not a good time for them, and there is no relief in sight right now. I would be very concerned if I was David Eby right now. And all we need is a couple more downgrades, and our interest costs go through the roof on our borrowing costs to support that debt and our deficit position. These are very dangerous times, and this is even worse than when they were voted out 75 to 77 seats total. And I think Jenny Kwan, and I can't remember what the other NDP that was left in the House at that time, but there were two of them left over. But I think this is as sweeping, as catastrophic. Eby has not supported jobs here. He has literally sent $4 billion worth of ferry production over to China. He has not supported the real estate sector, introducing such major risk and uncertainty. It's crippled it. Housing starts are down. We have, job losses in the construction sector. We've got, people leaving BC for the first, second time in history, in 2 quarters in a row. He is in a bad way, and he doesn't have anything to bolster it with. There is no forestry industry anymore. That's being decimated. The mining sector, it takes 12 to 20 years to get a mine up and running. I mean, there's no good news story for David Eby on any front right now. And so I'd be very concerned about his tenure long term.
I think for the last 6 months, he's been talking shovel ready. As any of those have a shovel in the ground? That's the real question. Shovel ready. Right now, you're driving investment out of the province and out of the country, actually. A lot of money is flowing to the United States. Donald Trump touting $20 trillion. And I've listened to the announcements from companies, including Cameco and Brookfield have invested $80 billion US into building 8 nuclear reactors. And we're seeing Cameco stock react. We're seeing Denison stock react. We're seeing a lot of, like the resource sector. Right now, we're seeing copper at all-time highs, gold at all-time highs, silver at all-time highs, all platinum, palladium, copper, all those things. Everything, every one of those, Canada's super rich in, and we're moving forward on, you tell me, I don't see it.
We should be the richest country in the world. And instead we sit and we self-inflict our wounds and we wait, I don't know for what. But this trickle of our economic future needs to stop, and we actually need to turn into the energy giant we were intended to be.
We need a get-her-done kind of guy or person. We need somebody that comes. Daniel Smith would probably do a really good job, Pierre Poilievre, you know what I mean? But somebody that says, this is what we're doing today, and this is because Alberta, clearly the bright spot in Canada right now. They just got a data center there too. That stuff is happening in Alberta, but the rest of the nation, we're seeing, our auto sector is almost decimated. We could go on and on and on. And supply management still exists at the detriment of the Canadian consumer.
I'm very sympathetic to supply management. My family were dairy farmers, in Alberta, but it's gone. It is passé. It should not be. I think I read a statistic that said that between 2012 and today, we've poured 6 billion liters of milk down the drain. And when I say down the drain, I'm speaking about the literal drain. We've just wasted it because of quotas and because of how the pricing is controlled. We don't need to reinvent. Australia, New Zealand had a very eloquent end to supply management. We just need to follow suit. We need to get rid of this. And if anyone thinks that it's not on the table, it is under Kuzma. And if we don't get rid of it, we won't have a deal in place with the U.S.
We appreciate everybody that watches and listens and shares, and we'd like you to share, subscribe, do all those things, because it's very much appreciated to get this out to more people. The show has grown tremendously, as had the channel in itself, and I do thank Renee for bringing all her vast experience and connections, and her knowledge on Canadian politics is second to none. And I would say this is the best political commentary show on the internet right now, and especially with coming from that much experience. And we're here every Tuesday, usually at noon. Sometimes like Renee is also busy as a developer, so. But we appreciate Renee coming on all the time. We appreciate you, the subscriber, as well, and the people that share this. But help us get it out to more people. I mean, that would be thing is we got to get more people demanding better, right? Demanding better from our politicians.
Absolutely. So please, save, share, subscribe, and get the word out. I appreciate you, Jim, and how you stay relevant and how you get the real news to all that listen. So thank you for all the work that you do and the sacrifice that you've made in order to make this happen, and that you've turned, such a huge corner. So congratulations on all your success in terms of the number of people that already currently watch. But please help us in getting that number up.
With that said, thank you for watching. Hey, Renee.